welcome to an algebra video tutorial, and we're talking in this video about what a linear equation is. We're going to define it and just kind of relate it. So if you've been going through our sequence here of videos, we started off talking a lot about arithmetic sequences. And the whole idea of an arithmetic sequence is you have a pattern with some starting term. So we had A1 was the first term. And then you have some value d that you're repeatedly adding, or we call that the common difference. And so in our arithmetic sequence, we were always starting with something, and it was a number pattern. What do we keep adding over and over again to get the next term in the sequence? And we had a formula for that. We said we could find any term, so a with a little n means any term, equals the first term plus we're adding a whole bunch of things repeatedly, the same thing repeatedly, the common difference, depending on however many times we want to add it. So we had that whole formula there. Starting value, what are we constantly adding? Then we moved on into direct variation. We noticed, okay, direct variation always goes to the point 0, 0. That seems to be kind of a hallmark of direct variation. And then they always fit this pattern. Now we were looking at a relationship between two variables, x and y, and they were directly related by this idea of k being the constant of variation. And so we looked at graphs that were lines, we looked at tables, we talked about the relationship between x and y. And if we take both of these ideas together, this idea of an arithmetic sequence, we're adding the same thing over and over again, and direct variation relating two variables x and y together, and this whole idea of a constant, we come up with linear equations. And one way we can write a linear equation is y equals m times x plus some constant number b. There we go. Every linear equation can be written in this form. So let's break down. What do all these letters mean? Again, letters, numbers, symbols all over the place. We want to give them some meaning. All right. So y, just like in direct variation, y is our dependent variable. So we can see, we're trying to see, well, how does y get affected by what is happening here? And so if we have a dependent variable where we're always changing our value x, which is the independent variable. So a linear equation shows a relationship between two variables. As x changes, how does that affect what happens to y? And so the meaning, as we look at all sorts of different problems and situations and attempt to use linear equations, our values for x and y and what they represent are going to change, but we're looking for a relationship between the two of them. Okay, now we still got m and b. What are those about? Well, m is going to be related to our idea of a constant of variation. So there's something that's kind of happening repeatedly, and this idea of a common difference. Something that we're adding over and over and over again. So you could think of m as our constant rate. You could think of repeated addition, repeatedly adding. You can also, we're going to talk more about this eventually, but we also call m the slope. So rate, slope, what are we adding? M is kind of telling us how we're changing. How do I get to the next value? What is happening over and over and over and over again? And it's always multiplied by x. So as I make x some value, it's going to be affected by our rate, our slope. What are we adding over and over? It's affected by m. Okay, lastly, let's look at b. So b is our constant rate. It's our starting value. It is constant, but it's not a rate. It's a starting value. It's a constant term. It's a number. It's related directly to this whole first term in a sequence. I got to start somewhere, right? Either in direct variation, we started at 0, 0. In our arithmetic sequence, we started at the first term. That's what B is. It's a starting point, and then from there, I'm growing or changing based on what my constant rate M is. So it's our constant term because it's just a number. There's no variable attached. We also call it, we'll get more into this, we call it the y-intercept. We'll see why as we get into graphs. So there we go. So that's a linear equation. Some other things that specifically make it a linear equation is my independent variable, this x value, is always to the first power. Now we don't write the 1 there, but a linear equation always has a term, a variable to the first power. So we'll look at a lot of that. But yeah, you have an x to the first power. It could be any variable, but it's just to the first power. If we have a power of 2 or a power of 3 or a fraction power, then we have a whole other different type of equation going on. And eventually you'll learn more about that in your algebra class. But linear equations have a variable to the first power. All right, stay tuned. Look at some of my other videos. We're going to really break down linear equations, how the equation relates to the graph, to tables, to problem solving, and really understand how this thing is going on. But I wanted to tie everything together in terms of what we've been looking at with sequences, what we've been looking at with direct variation, and kind of really draw it all together into talking about what a linear equation is. I hope this is a good start. Hopefully this makes sense as you start to really dig in and understand what linear equations yourself.